Would you guys sell Cole Palmer to Manchester United?
No,
Well, I guess
no, that will never
the thing is
happen.
that
He's he's the best. Chef's kiss.
great. On today's episode, I want us to look at what has been happening with teams since the start of 2026. And the way in which I want us to frame and discuss this is in the context of managers and clubs, or managers and their clubs. And obviously, I'm looking at the top end of the EPL, the hottest news around these managers, and the trends that are evolving when it comes to these managers. And obviously, we can't start from anywhere other than your club, Erasmus. You guys, hot, 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 hot. Let Enzo Maresca go. And that was like the first sacking of 2026, 1st of January. I don't know, it's like New Year present. You guys packaged it beautifully and handed it over to Enzo Maresca. And at the time, the questions was why? Because this is a manager who came in with a project on board, signed a long-term contract. Everyone knowing that this manager has won the Club World Cup, has won the Europa Conference League. He's on the up. He's at the time Chelsea was still in the top four. So what happened with Enzo Maresca, and why did Chelsea have to let him go?
So yeah, I mean, New Year's Day, Chelsea is the gift that just keeps on giving, right? But I mean, I've spoken so much about Enzo Maresca on this podcast, and we all know how much I love him as a
Yeah,
coach. And I think over the last couple of weeks, we've had more detail about his exit, and I think it matches what generally was the news in the build up to that
yeah,
period, which is that it became an untenable situation where the club felt they could not continue with him. Enzo Maresca also felt he could not continue with the club. So clearly there were some differences over there. And there's been many references of those differences. But I think some of the key ones has been some of the things we've been pointing out already. First off is the kind how much authority or power he's given over the decision making within the club. We've seen this drastically reduce over the years with the sporting directors having more power. And currently at Chelsea, there are six sporting directors. So the manager is just seen as a small component of the entire setup. In fact, they consider the players as an asset to be much more worthwhile than the coach. So the manager's job over there is just to prepare the team for games and not necessarily to make decisions about the club. And I think that even though Enzo Maresca looked in the beginning to be very happy with the
yeah,
squad and looked to also be very happy this model of working, especially given that this was his first big job, I think winning the Club World Cup and also winning the Conference League and some of his expectations of where he thinks Chelsea could be was probably way more ahead than what the sporting directors had in plan. For them, they had a 6 year plan that they wanted to execute, which the strategy involved buying very young players, talented players at high
yeah.
prices. But it felt at some point Enzo Maresca thought, well, this squad needs something different to start winning
I
now.
mean, I have just one more question about Chelsea, and it's more of a link between Maresca and Rosenior. Obviously, Liam has come in. He's the new Ange Postecoglou, probably much more smoother with his English. Gives on old man quotes. Gives on old man quotes. What is management? It's about managing the man, man and
Man
age.
age.
And the aging of man. Bro, they should give him the dictionary for him to define things for us. But obviously, I'm thinking about he's starting from the place where you think Maresca started from, where this is his very first, like, top tier, really, really big job. And you are thinking he's obviously happy with the project, the same level of excitement we saw with Enzo Maresca. But it seems to be that if young managers go ahead and win, they expect a lot more from the club, or they expect a lot more control in return. It's more like I've come in, I've not proven myself, so I understand and I'm happy to work with your model. But once I achieve something substantial, I expect that you give me trust, and the demonstration of that trust is to give me control over decision making, more influence over who gets signed and who doesn't. And it's in some ways breaking that relationship, because you can envision why that happened with Enzo Maresca. He feels that that should be a repayment of trust of the achievements that he's demonstrated in a year. Do we not foresee Liam with the exact same trap here, where he's a young manager, exciting prospect? If he goes on to do well, you might find Chelsea back in that power struggle again.
Yeah, that's an acute observation, because, and that's for me, it's a real risk,
Yeah,
right? It's a real risk, because sitting here maybe a year or 18 months ago, you wouldn't have imagined that Enzo Maresca would be saying, "Let me have my say, or I would walk out." He looked to have been totally pleased to be having the job in the first place. And I've heard two sides of the story. Some people trying to paint the extremities of it, saying that Maresca was demanding very heavily, and also the other sides who were saying, "Oh well, like the sporting directors were just being too ridiculous." And I think, just like with all issues, it almost always leads to the center. I think first of all, you see that after the Club World Cup, the sporting directors were rewarded with a contract extension. Maresca wasn't rewarded with
yeah,
one. I think you also see, like, after the Club World Cup, the squad the squad was very, very fatigued. No preseason, and the investment in terms of the players, it didn't go as we all expect. There was still sort of a preference for recruiting very, very young players, and I think when and lastly, reports of the medical team withholding some, making the final decision on how he uses some of these players, and the club also had concerns about Maresca not utilizing the full squad. And you can understand why that was so if he was dealing with these frustrations, because from his perspective, he came into the club with a young, exciting squad, with a brand of football that he thought we can play and get to one level. Notice that this stalled at some point, and towards the end of the season, he had to be very, very adaptable. At the Club World Cup, he showed us different styles of football, but the feeling was that he was moving to level
yeah.
two. And to move to level two, he needed players who had played under that system and to find the continuity and consistency. However, some of the two biggest contributors were sold, and the replacements didn't necessarily shoot up too much in terms of quality. He needed a ball playing center back, because he said he needed someone specifically. Levi Cole was hurt, and it was just Tosin who could do that in the club. He was told to find a solution, so he had to adapt his way of playing. He likes to play with the keeper in the back
Yeah.
line, and the keeper coming out to play. Robert Sanchez is horrible with his foot, even though he's a good shot stopper. So he tries to sign a goalkeeper in the summer who can do that, and they say no, stick with what you have. And in the end, he's had to change tactics. So I think if you're Maresca, you start sitting there and being like, look, we can play some exceptional football, but this is not working out. But if you bring in the context that uh, Man City was looking at him, Juventus was looking at him, and the stocks was rising, then you would understand why he would act on this. Like, these are not reasons for a manager to say, okay, I'll not do this. Maybe it's a reason to be doubtful, but you'd have more patience. So I do think that some of the things that they were saying, that there was appeal from external environment, played a crucial role. But I think for Liam Rosenior, things have to probably go bad. He has to probably command such interest also from, because Man City versus Chelsea, you can see why the pool is there. But I don't see too many clubs where you can say that Liam Rosenior, they would actively be poaching him unless he actually severs ties with the club. And also wanted to add, like, it seems when Rosenior took over, some of the issues that we were seeing, some of them are beginning to disappear. His willingness to adapt, to play some of the young players, is still paying off. So you begin to wonder, why was Maresca making the ultimate decision that these young players can't play? And you have a feeling that it bled into some of the performance issues that we saw if he's not willing to trust the full squad.
Interesting. One final question about Chelsea. Would you guys sell Cole Palmer to Manchester United?
No,
Well, I guess
no, it will never
the thing is
happen.
that with the club model that you guys are running and looking for the highest bidder, are you sure it will never happen?
Yeah, I think not that I don't think Chelsea wouldn't sell. I think that if Palmer wants to leave and there is a good price, Chelsea will sell. But I think Chelsea's unwillingness to sell Palmer's valuation would mean that there'll be a lot of clubs who are put off. So I, for one, think it has to take like someone tabling like a 120 million, like what we saw with Isak, right? And there's not a lot of clubs who would do
Obi
that,
Bessie,
in
someone
my
signed
opinion.
vets for that. So I mean, Cole Palmer, it will make sense to sign for
Probably, to be honest, if you are, we have Esteval, so if you are giving us 120 mil for Palmer, to be honest, I'll take it.
also with his
At this
injury
point, I'll
issues.
take
I'm
it.
sure Chelsea people will take it and buy new one.
Yeah, yeah, we'll take
Okay,
it. We'll
let's
take it.
come to the guys in Liverpool who have spent the most amount of money buying experience. Yet for some reason, it's a transition season. And Slot said that, and Slot, after winning the Premier League, going to be the biggest spenders in the league, comes to tell us last week that this season was always going to be a transition season. A transition season where you are
Mm.
the biggest spender after being champion. It was obviously a statement of intent to go ahead and win the title and challenge for it. Now that it's down the gutters, he's saying this season was always going to be a challenging, a transition season. Well, Liverpool only have 5 wins in 18 games. Should Liverpool keep him? And should this really be viewed in the context of a transition season for him?
You remember what I told you the other time about project managers, the people who know how to do the review.
Yeah,
There's a certain revisionism where they can put it. Slot, he's the best. Chef's kiss. No, but like I agree with you that there's a lot of revisionism about Liverpool's
yeah,
season and the season they were like after they won 20, they had the best player in the league, the best defender in the league. They went ahead and splashed 450 million on the best striker in the
yeah,
league. They were due to take over. And I understand that there's some bit of transition, but this transition was done so that it would be
yeah.
immediate, so that there wouldn't be gaps in between. I think Jamie Carragher made an observation yesterday that the Liverpool squad as it is now isn't built for the Premier League, which sounds very funny because they just won the Premier League
But
last
weren't
season. But
the
the Premier
same
League has
people who
become,
said Liverpool's initial losses were blips? Oh, it was a blip. They will come back and fight stronger. I don't know when the blip narrative vanished. Now, now they are straight for the
yeah,
league.
yeah, it was. And to be fair to Jamie Carragher, he was one of those who was sounding the early alarm bells. But there was not a lot of people who were interested in listening to the
Yeah,
conversation that there's something wrong with Liverpool, even from last season, the way they were winning. And now I think there are beginning to be real concerns if his style of football would survive in the Premier League. Like, it's not that we understand you are in transition and we understand you want to play vets in the
yeah,
10. It's not that we are
yeah,
it's not that we are saying um it's not that we can't see that okay something that needs some time to work. We are telling you that even if this is what you build, it won't work. It won't work. Like for example, Chelsea is beginning to go back to their flat 4-3-3 shape. You are seeing them play three midfielders now. It's very very difficult to play the kind of football that Ancelotti wants to like that fast forward quick football that Ancelotti wants to play because teams will just sit in a low block against you like all day. But I do think that just for the fact that he won the Premier League title, he deserves some time. I think you can also admit that not injury issues, but the squad depth was not great to challenge the season, especially in defense, also in midfield, and surprisingly even in the attack in terms of the options. So you would expect that next season they'll go out there and splash. But I'm genuinely worried about their Champions League places this season. And I think if they don't make Champions League, he's not going to find a lot of supporters backing him.
interesting. Anyway, some people said he's gradually making Ten Hag not look like a fraud anymore. It's just a national heritage. So they, will-
It's a Dutch thing.
they should Liverpool fans should watch out. Anyway, let's talk about Manchester United and Michael Carrick. Now, United also
Mm.
early in the year, following Chelsea, Amorim, get out. And it's it's the same issues of relationship breaking down, obviously in different contexts to the likes of Maresca and the Chelsea board. But for him, it was more of he was just unwilling to adapt, and everybody said that would be his undoing, and that became his undoing. Do you think, and I'm not asking this question with the benefit of hindsight, as at the time United let him go, was that the best United could do?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer, right? Because if you look at the sequence of events right up until his sacking, it was almost
Yeah,
predictable. That press conference he did was a sackable offense. It's just one manager in this entire league who has done that and got away with it, which is Oliver
yeah,
Glasner. And if you think about it, Glasner is leaving at the end of the
yeah.
season anyway. His contract is ending, and then you want to get sacked in January, February. No, 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 no. You stay. He probably might get sacked, but we all see it. Like you get sacked, they get
Why should
compensation.
Crystal Palace bear that
And
money? They won't do it.
no, they know they will be safe, so they won't do it unless I think there's a threat, there's real threat that they'll go on relegation. But I think if you look at some of his behavior, they were left with no choice, and you could see that they had to take a snap decision because they were scrambling around just to get an interim in place. Even till now, we are not sure, is it an interim, would he take over to, like, it's a bit of an odd
Yeah,
situation in terms of how they'll even prepare for next season. And I think if you look at how Michael Carrick is playing, it probably might give them problems because we are entering back into the Ole cycle again, and there'll be a huge debate. But I personally don't think Amorim was ready for the league. I personally don't think he wanted to come. And I think that even whilst he was in the job here at United, he just felt like the feeling was like, I knew I didn't want to come. This is why I didn't want to come. And I think that feeling never left him. And you could always see it hanging around the squad. So I think if you see how United is playing now, but regardless of whether they make top four or not, I think he was doing an okay job. They were always going to come through because you see, at the end, it's about the quality of the players that you have on the
yeah.
pitch. So the manager's tactics and things only comes into a certain degree. And Man United had the squad. It was just about getting the best out of them. So I think that the decision was inevitable.
Interesting. Now they've brought back Michael Carrick. A lot of people's issues are, like you mentioned, the Ole cycle again. But some people also make the argument that, to be fair, Ole's cycle was great. The only problem was they signed a player who destroyed everything. What destroy everything? What Segbefia in Cristiano Ronaldo, who spoilt the rhythm of that project. And it's more like if the Ole cycle was working and Ronaldo hadn't been signed, that story would have ended differently. And so, if this is what it takes to get United taken again, why not give it a go and then just make sure that you do not bring another, I don't know, Ronaldo to come and destroy someone's tactics when it's about to peak to the third gear.
Yeah, no, I empathize with that because at the end you have to make do with the data that's in front of
Yeah,
you. If the guy has won the games, he looks to be managing the team well. The decision is good at that point, and I think the only decision was made sense at that point. I mean, in hindsight, everything can be reviewed.
yeah,
But I think what's more interesting, especially since you mentioned the Cristiano Ronaldo thing, is that as a Manchester United manager, it's not only your competence on the training ground, it's also your competence in the administrative affairs, managing which players are coming into your clubs, which ones are going out and planning for the season and the squad. That's part of what it is. And it's actually quite interesting that also this was where Amorim's problems began to happen with the board, where he wanted to have say over the specific players he was bringing in, didn't like the compromises they were making. Although people would say that, unlike Maresca, you've not won enough to be making that kind of noise.
says
You've not won
manager, he
enough
didn't
to be
come to be
making.
coach. He came to be
Yeah,
manager.
yeah. I felt like making a power play when you've not. It makes you look
He's
childish
playing
and
empty
stupid.
power.
You do
He's
that
not
when you
playing it.
yeah you only Yeah, you only do that when you are
Yeah,
winning. So, but at the end, I think if we come to the end of the season, I think the discussion doesn't make any sense now. Doesn't make any sense. We need to get to the end of the
yeah,
season, look at Carrick, and I think if he's doing well with the squad that he has, given that the issue of contention has been with transfers, how much decision say you are making, Carrick looks like the kind of guy that you give him the players, he's happy to work with them and can get the best out of them. And probably that might suit their model in the long term. Having someone who is willing to integrate and everything. But I think if you start having some of those bad results, that's when you start to see the behavior. Would Carrick be pushing
Yeah,
for, say, more? Would the directorship be willing to take responsibility? I think that's where you start seeing some of these rifts happen.
interesting. Anyway, they said since Michael Carrick started, they've started seeing prime Fergie United again. You hear Bruno Cunha,
We are winning the league.
Bruno Cunha, Bruno, Bruno, Dog, Bruno Cunha, Bruno. Bro, United are playing triangles on the pitch like they are rondo on training field. Anyway, let's talk about Manchester City.
Charlie.
Now, these are two clubs that obviously Manchester City and Arsenal are the two clubs that United have dealt with in recent weeks. And after each of these losses to these clubs, specific trends of discussions have come up, which sort of, in essence, United created this chaos for these two teams. First, let's start with Pep and Manchester City. Do you think Pep is a checkbook manager? Because from the noise that came after the United loss, a lot of people said Pep Guardiola is just unable to build teams. And his first real test of depleting a team and trying to build it up, he's taking way too long and spending way too much money and turning over way too many players just in an attempt to make things work. And so if you give Pep without a checkbook, he might not ever have a successful project.
Yeah, it's a crazy place where clubs have locked themselves in now. Uh, there are many facets to this. Like Man City has become the club that just cannot risk not winning the
Yeah,
title. As crazy as it sounds, they cannot risk not competing. That's the problem that they have now. They need to compete now, 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 now. They do not have space and time for a rebuild. It is just incompatible with the brand that they have built, with their long-term future ambitions, especially moving into the World Cup in Saudi Arabia. They can't. And that would mean they need to spend.
yeah,
And that means they don't have time to actually build the football team. I think they've taken a bet to say that if you sign very, very talented players and put them together, they'll produce spark. And they really do have talented players. But I think they've just got to a point where I feel they've sensed that Arsenal has not run away with it yet. And if they were to give it a little push, they'll win. And they have the money
yeah,
because, to be honest, they've also been making very, very good sales. So their balance, and they make a lot of money from their sponsorship. So their balance sheet is good.
yeah,
So I think they are utilizing where they have the strength that is within the market in buying the defense and buying the goals. You can call that checkbook manager. But if you also look at City's academy, they run one of the best academies in the world. Their products, Palmer, Morgan Rogers, Delap, are now the talk, Lavia are now the talk of town,
yeah,
which goes to show that they have the pipeline. It's just giving them minutes in the City team. There's a huge disparity between the academy and the City first team, and that's where the problem is, which means they don't have time to give players the minutes to develop because every game that they go, they need to go and win. And I feel like that's the cause of this. They would best be helped with the transition, and that's why my feeling is that Guardiola might leave. But I also feel like Guardiola has ambitions to like win 20 Premier League titles, like say Alex Ferguson. I genuinely think that he has that belief, so he wants to go for it again and again and again. But I don't know. May you still have City, so I'll probably leave it to you. But I just don't think
I
that
still have City.
they get
The
it.
only thing right now is like it looks like the rumors around his divorce and his wife being the one who taught him the tactics, like they are more and more proving to be true. Because after the divorce, he seems to be struggling. But I mean, on a more serious note, the conversations around City, I personally still believe City will win the league. I think Arteta would you give us time? It will get to that time where everything I've been saying will come to pass, where everyone realizes that Arteta is like Gareth Southgate. And recently, that comparison has started. He's the one guy who is able to change a team, build it up, but is not a winner. And so everybody compares him to the floor of where the team was before he came to pick it, but not the potential of the team that he is wielding the helm of at this point. And everybody gave, like, what do you call it, Southgate that slack for a very long time. Oh, look at where he took England from, and look at where he's taking them to. And then very quickly, people started realizing, wait a minute, the talent we have and the kind of semi-final, final, shambolic performances we've been putting together and crumbling when it's time to win is clearly not about not being capable. It's good to be grateful to a manager who can build, but there's a point at which you know that the team's needs have left you. And for me, would come to Arsenal very soon. If I look at Arteta, I respect him for being a rookie manager who has been able to build this team. I do not think, and I've never thought it was a fair request of anyone to ask him to win the league and win the Champions League. But let's talk about Pep Guardiola. The reason why people started this whole conversation about checkbook manager is that they felt people used to claim that he's the greatest manager of all time. And he's better than the likes of Alex Ferguson, Jose Mourinho, Carlo Ancelotti, and he's doing amazing things. And people said, hold on a minute. With the way in which this guy is struggling to rebuild Manchester City, think about what Ranieri did with Leicester. Think about what Jose did with Porto. Think about what Fergie came to pick a dusty United side and did with them. If you are really looking for a manager who created teams of their own, Pep doesn't come near any of these guys. Pep obviously has created or has managed teams that have played some of the most dominant football. But I guess this is what it boils down to. What is your determination of who is the greatest manager of all time? Is it a guy who is able to make big players play their best football? Or is it a guy who picks the underdogs, like Ranieri did with Leicester, and wins them the league? Anyway, let's come to. I don't know if you have anything to say here before we move on to ask
Yeah,
the
like
rookiness.
for me, the greatest managers in the world always what makes them great is they win titles.
Yeah,
If you think of Sir Alex Ferguson, he won titles. And Sir Alex Ferguson, people don't remember, but he was also tagged as a checkbook manager. Player is popping off in Tottenham, buy him. Anyone who is popping off anywhere, buy them, bring them into the team, let them perform. If you also think about Guardiola and the football he plays, the precision he demands, not everyone can play his football. So he can go to a Leicester side and he's probably going to look very average. But I feel you can say the same of every coach. If you give Guardiola Everton, you think he cannot get some wins out of Everton? He probably can. But what they require him to do is to win the league each and every year.
if you give
And to do
him
that, they'll use
Porto
every power
team,
they have.
if you give
Yeah.
him the Porto team that Jose won the Champions League with, clearly Guardiola would most likely not be able to get them to win the Champions League.
That's also a point. That's also a point because I think he as a manager relies on different things. Managers like Mourinho, even Klopp, and Ranieri, as you
Yeah,
mentioned, rely on some different things. Guardiola, he just wants to go and play the football. Give me the players who can play the football or that I can coach to play the football. Players who are ready. And you can see that he looked at his squad. He has Savinho, whom they refused to let go at the summer.
yeah.
Then he brought in Oscar Bob in there. Then he puts Bernardo Silva in there. Then he puts someone else, Ryan Check in there. Then now he's just like, go and get me the guy who is scoring goals in Bournemouth and just put him in there. Like, don't even overthink it. Like, go and get the players
His
together to
defense is crafted
just go
and he
and win
said,
the
go
thing.
and get
And
gay. Go and get gay and bring him.
yeah, yeah. Because he was playing with an 18-year-old like just a
Yeah,
couple of weeks back. And it's quite clear they kind of see where he lets his centre back
yeah,
stand. You're telling an 18-year-old to do that. He won't be able to do it. So I think it's a bit unfair to just call him a checkbook manager. But at the same time, what would make him great is if he wins.
yeah.
But if he doesn't win, then maybe that title is fair.
Someone said all the prayerful guys have gone to Man City. Doku,
Charlie,
Semenyo, and Gay. These days they are praying on the pitch if they score everywhere, if they finish the match.
it's serious though. The Arsenal squad, half of them Madueke, Timber,
Yeah,
Saka, prayer guys, Gabriel. So it's like they were like City was like, no, the partying and things is too much. So let's bring in some of the prayer guys.
they said right now Arsenal organize prayer warriors and prayer session because
Charlie, yeah, no be small yeah, that was your nyame guama.
once City has started praying on the pitch, they are done. Sorry. Anyway, let's talk about Arsenal because it's just befitting that you leave the league leaders at the tail end of the discussion to give them the respect that they deserve, or so-called respect that people say they deserve. I mean, you still stick with Arsenal winning the league, and I'm not going to ask the question of whether or not Arsenal will win the league because we've asked you like 7 times and we know your responses. Do you think that this Arsenal team is beginning to look too rigid or too overcoached, such that they are scared to deviate from specific instructions that has been given to them? And you see how detailed Arteta is in the way in which he plays. I think if you watch Arsenal in the past 2, 3 games, especially in the EPL, you feel that this is a team that has patterns and cannot deviate from them, even if it's clear that these patterns are not working.
Yeah, I have to disagree. I have to disagree. Like when people we just spoke about Pep being a checkbook
Yeah.
manager, like it wasn't working, just went to go and sign. Like the way Arteta has built this team, like let's be honest, 6 years ago, no one would put Saka on a list to say he's one of the best like players, wingers in the
Yeah.
world. Martinelli, people wouldn't say that. Like a lot of these players, people wouldn't say that. We saw
Best wingers in the
Jesus,
world.
not in the world. Now, and that's the point I'm even making. That these players, like Trossard, if Arsenal was to let go of Trossard, you wouldn't find the top six teams like chasing him, trying to get a signature. But they are producing wonders in Arsenal. Like
No,
apart from Declan Rice, who I would say is world class. Apart from Declan Rice, maybe Gabriel Saliba, maybe a Califury, and there's no disrespect to these players, but all I'm just trying to say is that the this group of players are ones that you can clearly see Arteta's imprint on each and every one of
no,
them,
but
that he was responsible for.
Erasmus. The question I'm asking is,
Mhm.
obviously you are seeing his imprint. And my question is that imprint becoming too much? Plus, usually when I hear arguments about Arteta has elevated the standard of these players would not have been wanted by top six clubs. He went to buy them when he was a top six club. He went to buy them. Nobody bought them for him. Nobody came and said, go and buy Gabriel
Yeah,
Jesus or go and buy Martinelli or go and buy Trossard. He went to look for these players to buy them. So whatever he found to
yeah,
go and look for them, he should deal with it. And he should use them to win the league because he knew that's the expectation.
yeah. For me, like to answer your question a bit, because I was coming to the
Yeah,
point. Everything that has everything that has come up until this point has has been like he has been integral in terms of putting it
yeah,
together. That's the truth. But if you look at this Arsenal side, they play in a lot of different ways. They are able to come up with deal with any challenge. Recently, they faced Inter Milan, they dismissed them. They faced Bayern Munich, they dismissed them. I think for the problem with Arsenal for me, and it's also reflecting this season, is that you don't peak in November. Like no one wants to be the best in the world in November, as Vincent Company said. Teams naturally face decline halfway through the season. It's about how much they can pick themselves back up. I would say though that this squad that Arteta has is the best squad in all of the top five leagues. Is the best squad that any manager has. Is the widest, deepest squad. Think of the number of bodies they have in each position, and therefore it is incumbent on him. You see, at first they were like potential, and that was the point I was making. They were potential. So when they were hitting, you couldn't blame him too much. But now they are the top guys. Now these are the guys in position, and he has the squad. He has all the tools. He has no excuses. He just has to win. And I think my only fear for them is that the nerves around the stadium, the nerves within the fans, and sometimes him also reflecting that anxiety in terms of how much he wants to restrict control. You see the frustration when they lose a game. He's going hard at the players. raising the standards. And that's all well and good. These players seem to have responded to it. But it also has its negative sides where if it starts going wrong, it can become very, very hard to get the players back on board. And the good news for him is that in the Premier League, City is still like hopping. The other clubs are still a bit far behind. So I think he may do well with the Premier League. But I think in the Champions League, all it just takes is that lapse of concentration in one game and they are probably out. And that's why I don't think that they may win everything. But I think it is his titles to lose.
Interesting. Anyway, you have to be connected. You have to be connected. You have to plug the bulb and the light and transfer it from one person to the
Light,
other and be connected and be
Edison.
connected. Bro, be connected. Arteta's problem, as I see it, especially with the game with United, was that the team was too rigid. And let me give you, if you watch the game, I'll give you a specific pattern to watch this. When Ben White came on, anytime he had a throw, it took him about 20 seconds to take the throw. This was a player on the team that was trailing the game. Most of the time, when it's getting to the latter parts of a game and the team is trailing, you see they want to get things moving and be quick. When he picks up the ball to throw the ball, he's expecting to see an exact type of pattern map out in order to initiate that throwing. The way in which they treat every throwing as a set piece, which has been their coaching from the start of this season and obviously from the latter end of last season as well. And for me, my concern is that it seems like if what they've been told to do is not there, they are clueless in how to deal with it. If you look at the substitutions he did four substitutions. The team looked exactly the same. Why? Because they were just new people repeating the exact same processes on the pitch. And it looks like this is a team that has
Mm,
transitioned from the positive to the negative. So, for instance, the very first season they challenged for the title, Arsenal took everyone by surprise by scoring people, but their defense was weak. So they were playing expansive, exciting football, but that defense was not strong. They came around and found a balance, but obviously the defense still cost them because they were conceding some late goals. And then they built the best defense in the league. And now they are too defensive for their own good in some instances. They are not scoring goals in open play and they are relying exclusively on set pieces. And they might not win you the games. Because set pieces, as much as it's unpredictable for the opposition, is also unpredictable for you. It's not a predictable pattern of getting the number of goals that you need all the time. So if by any chance Arsenal is not lucky on the day to get enough set piece goals, they are not scoring, right? And it's about seeing the team rely. So the time you see Arsenal fans cheer is when they have a set piece. When they have the ball, they are not
mhm.
expecting to score. They are not expecting to play some brilliant play. When they get to the edge of the box and a team sits deep, it's a semicircle. You can just count the number of times they circulate. One, two. It's like a compass rotating and never completing the circle. That's
Mm,
how Arsenal is. And for me, I feel like this is a sign of a team that is not just nervous, but a team that is overcoached, right? Because they seem to be, the manager has taught us and it has worked. And it has worked so much that we believed in it so much that they've reached the level where if they don't take care, what they've learned start to cease to work and they might plateau. And so they need some form of spark. It might be the manager tweaking and evolving the way in which they play. But if not, you are starting to see the signs of a team whose style of play is no more getting the results via the fine margins that they were getting. And this is the exact problem Liverpool faced at the start of the
yeah,
season. They got away with it for 5 games and it caught up on them. Arsenal probably got away with it for much longer because obviously they were defensively solid, but it probably might be starting to catch up on them how much they do not create open-ended chances and score goals from open play. But anyway, for me, I still think
yeah.
they will
I've
drop
seen
them.
some of the stats for I've seen some of the stats for the attackers, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Like Madueke hasn't scored since for a year now. Saka hasn't scored in 11 games. Trossard 1 goal in 11 games, Martinelli 2 goals in 18 games of that sort. Like Victor Gyökeres hasn't scored in the last 9 Premier League games. Like the stats are very horrible for the attackers. So I can see it's surprising that he has players like as Eberici as and this one young player
Yeah,
Nwaneri who are seen as these creative gems, but rather he limits their use a lot, and we're seeing that like they are not appearing on the field. So I do think that he has the squad to change up the game if he wants to,
yeah.
but he needs to find the boldness to do it.
Anyway, for me, I still think City will win the league. And like I was saying, I think it's unfair for anyone to ask Arteta to win the league because time and time and again, people forget that this is his first managerial stint. People forget that this is Arteta. In his first 2 seasons, there is no one that looked worse than Amorim, than Arteta looked. He's been able to build a team. He's been able to have the patience because COVID at the time was there and fans were not going to the stadium and he was not being booed and the frustrations were shrouded with the panic of what do you call it, the world in global politics and COVID and all that. So nobody pressured Arteta. I bet you if there were fans in the stadium, Arteta would have been gone. But he got the scape. He managed to find the perfect time to be a horrible manager, and they allowed him. And now he's building something. But I think a lot of people are expecting him to do what he's incapable of doing. And maybe he will prove me wrong. But in my assessment, such managers always prove me right. So thanks for listening on this episode of the Shaft Sports. Obviously, we've been analyzing managers and clubs at the top end of the table. Let's see what happens this week. And as we go into the league weekend and also the Champions League games, let's see whether or not Arsenal redeems their image. They've been doing well in Europe, but they've been suffering in domestic. Let's see whether they redeem their image. Let's see whether Slot is able to change his transition tone and whether or not Liam is able to prove to people that small boys are not young. Thanks and see you on the next episode. As for Manchester United fans, they watch from the TV. So for them, we can't talk about them right now.